G'day and welcome to the program. I'm Connor Duffy. Indigenous Australians feel they're the forgotten voices in the great debate over the future of the country's most important river system, the Murray-Darling Basin. Irrigators, environmentalists and everyone in between have had their say, often loudly, but the Indigenous communities dotted across the basin feel left out. I visited the Wamba Wamba people on the Edward River in Deniliquin. The Edward River near Deniliquin has been home to the Wamba Wamba people for thousands of years. To them, it'll always be the college. On its bank, local women collect medicine plants and speak of a connection to a place they feel guardians of.
That's what we were placed here first for, and we cared for our country. And it's sad to see that she's dying on us, especially the river, the waterways.
Just up a bit further.
It was here that the ancestors of Patrick Moore and Tracy Hamilton carved out canoes from native giants like these. To this day, they also harvest river grasses, and they're angry these traditions are being ignored to provide water for irrigation.
If we don't have water into these certain areas, wetlands and stuff like that, it's like a part of us that's missing.
In town, irrigators have their view of the draft plan on display. In a nearby tin shed, Indigenous people are putting a contrary view directly to the authority. Consultants have been engaged to type up oral submissions.
We'll cover 22 towns minimum, but we're picking up little satellite towns. So yeah, we're getting a very good spread right across the whole basin.
But some feel they're only being acknowledged years into the process.
They want our opinions and they want our views, but they're not really listening to us.
Aboriginal people feel an entire economy has been created out of trading water rights from this river, and they feel they've been left out. They worry the same thing might happen with the Basin Plan. Scientists fear Australia could be losing as much as 30 centimetres of precious coastline every year, and recent storms and high seas have caused more damage along some seaside areas. It's a problem that's caused fierce battles in Byron Bay and other beach towns, and now the argument has travelled all the way north to Darwin. Genevieve Hussey reports.
Every year, the bike paths and recreation areas at Nightcliff and East Point are a focus for residents who want to walk, picnic and unwind. It's a much-loved part of the Darwin lifestyle.
It's gorgeous because it's so people-friendly, and you see families and young people and old people and dogs, and you see the people who come every day.
The foreshores, it's wonderful. As a cyclist, I love the fact that the bike track follows the coast.
But the coastline is under threat. For decades, coastal erosion has been eating away at many of these cliff-top sites.
One of the problems with the process that underlies this is it cuts in underneath the rock, and then you get sections up to 5 or 6 metres long that collapse in one hit. And if that was to happen in a couple of spots on Nightcliff in particular, we'd lose the cycle path and perhaps part of the road.
Last week, Darwin was battered by wild weather. Winds of nearly 100 kilometres an hour, heavy rain and big waves slammed the foreshore.
There were huge rocks, big enough to sit on, and there was one of these tables and chairs was just totally smashed just by the rocks that were thrown up.
Di Koza has lived near the Nightcliff foreshore for more than 20 years and takes regular walks along the bike track. While last week's storm caused significant damage, Di Koza says the changing face of the coastline is an ongoing problem.
Each year the cliff goes further back, and in some places it's quite dramatic where bits have actually fallen in. And there's a couple of trees we've been watching for the last 2 or 3 years. They're still hanging on this year, but it might be their last year, I think.
In 2008, Darwin City Council commissioned Graham Jones, a climate change expert from Southern Cross University, to examine the rate of coastal erosion at East Point and Nightcliff. He found the sea is claiming about 30 centimetres of coastline a year.
At East Point Reserve, the coastal erosion there is very, very close to the road. At Nightcliff, the erosion, which is mostly natural there, by the way, is very close to 3-storey block apartments and the road. So it's quite severe.
The shoreline has retreated so far in the past 60 years that artillery dumped off the cliff face during the Second World War is now further out to sea.
Over 10 metres since the war, because there's a lot of military equipment and stuff that was pushed off the cliffs at the end of the war, and it's now sort of 10, 20 metres offshore.
Now Darwin City Council has commissioned a second study of the foreshore, this time to highlight the areas which are most at risk and to plan strategies to halt the erosion.
The big question becomes how much is it going to cost? I know recently the government did some work on rock walling in front of the Sailing Club and the Trailer Boat Club. That's a very low wall and quite a short distance, and I think that cost something like $1 million.
In the long term, protecting all of the shoreline may not be possible.
You're not going to push the ocean back with a broom, and the scale of works that would be required here when you've got 7 metre tides is astronomical.
Professor Andrew Campbell from Charles Darwin University believes protecting mangroves, planting vegetation and stabilising some cliff areas will help protect much of Darwin's coast. But he says predicted rising sea levels and wilder weather mean in the long term foreshore erosion is likely to worsen.
The sea level is rising at a rate that's almost as fast as anywhere else in the world, at about 8 or 9 millimetres per year over the last 20 years. So we've got an underlying rise of sea level. If you couple that with a king tide and then a big weather event, you're going to get some very big waves.
Professor Campbell says the problems facing Darwin aren't unique, and some towns along the east coast of Australia are already discussing a planned retreat from the coastline.
In Byron Shire in particular, the Shire has said we are not going to build seawalls. We're going to have to retreat from areas that we can't defend.
So you've got these softer rocks, the coloured rock in underneath here, getting punched away by the water and eroded by the rainwater coming through.
Darwin City Council says a long-term management plan is needed for the city's coastline.
None of that exists up here, and it's a real problem the Territory needs to address urgently.
Di Koza says some areas of the cliff face have already been successfully protected by rock walls. She hopes remedial work will save more of the cliff face because this recreation area is too important to lose.
Historically for Darwin, it's an important part of Darwin. Come down here any weeknight and there are people everywhere, and it's really very valuable from that perspective.
The resurgence of interest in vintage and times gone by means returning old buildings to their former splendour is in vogue. But what if you were faced with an ageing hydroelectric generator that hasn't had a facelift since the 1950s? Emily Bryan met one community in Tasmania's Central Highlands that's planning just that.
It's been decades since the Tungatina power station was fully manned. Hydro Tasmania's $70 million restoration means all hands are back on deck. 20 workers are putting in 12 hours a day to replace 3 of the 5 turbines commissioned in 1953.
Refurbished the first machine in 2010 and that took nearly a year to complete. And now we're on to our second machine, and that should take us about 9 months.
The new turbines, designed and built in Europe, are more efficient, and their capacity is 5 megawatts higher.
Largely the project's not about upgrading the station. Largely the project is around ensuring another 50 years of ongoing operation of the power station.
We're also resolving a number of long-term OH&S issues around the machine with, say, for oil mist.
Operators can record temperatures, flows and vibration and send more detailed information to engineers in Hobart. 5 penstocks take water from Tungatina Lagoon and return it to the Nive River. In between, the turbines act as a washing machine in reverse.
Here we have the water turning the washing machine, which turns the motor, which makes energy.
The turbines currently generate 550 gigawatt hours of energy each year. That's 6% of Hydro's total generation and enough to power 80,000 homes.
Similar restorations have been done at Strathgordon, Trevallyn and Poatina.
We're about to embark on an upgrade program of our Kaplan turbines. So these are single machine stations, run of the river, in the Derwent and up at Paluna near Devonport.
It's also a chance for Hydro to upskill its apprentices.
It's not just normal maintenance, you're pulling, you're seeing the inside of it. It's different every day. I've changed the location, I did 4 years at Politina, now I'm here.
Tungatina's third turbine will be replaced next year.
Queensland researchers say they've made a breakthrough in an underwater world, linking the health of coral to the health of large reef fish, crucial for ecosystems. The study has used video cameras to monitor fish in the shallows around Lizard Island in far north Queensland. Penny Timms sent this story from Townsville.
It's a reality TV show on the Great Barrier Reef. Researchers set up video cameras in 17 locations around Lizard Island to monitor the habits of large reef fish. They found species like coral trout, sweetlip and snapper like to shelter under table corals rather than other reef formations. But they're not sure why.
We think one reason might be that they're actually trying to avoid being predated upon by sharks and other things roaming around the reef.
They also appear to be sun-smart.
I think they are. There's an element of that, because even if they're not predatory fish, they will still hide under the corals. So there's something about being in the shade on a coral reef that fish like, and we didn't realise that it was that important to them.
But the table corals, favourite with the fish, are some of the most vulnerable to damage.
So if we lose those corals, we're going to lose something that's important to the fish. And these are big fish like coral trout. You'd never imagine that a coral trout would need a piece of coral, but it seems that they do.
What that means for the sustainability of reef fish is the focus of a new investigation.
Certainly on the reef there are other shapes or other structures that they could perhaps resort to. But there is certainly a question to be asked there.
Either way, scientists say the ecosystem of the Great Barrier Reef is changing, and minimising the impact through good management is key to its survival.
And that's all for this edition of the program. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at ConnorDuffyABC, and you can keep up with all the latest environmental news at the ABC Online, abc.net.au/environment. See you next time.